Emma Collins found him dying in the alley behind the Vampire Cafe on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary autumn evening that should have ended with sore feet and small tips, not with a silver-haired stranger bleeding against the brick wall, 2 infants crying in his arms, and 3 words that would shatter her entire world. The hunters. Coming. The Vampire Cafe wasn't supposed to be real. It was a tourist trap, a gothic novelty tucked between a vintage bookshop and a closed tattoo parlor. Velvet curtains, plastic fangs behind the bar, fake candelabras casting amber light across cracked leather booths. Emma Collins served overpriced blood orange sangrias to giggling college students who thought darkness was just aesthetic. But on the night everything changed, she discovered that some shadows have teeth. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The autumn fog had rolled in early that evening, transforming the narrow city streets into something from an old European postcard. Emma watched the mist curl against the cafe's stained glass windows, her reflection fractured into crimson and violet fragments. The ornate doors, genuine antiques the owner had salvaged from an estate sale, gleamed beneath the iron sconces, their gothic flourishes catching the amber streetlight. "Emma, you good to close up?" Marcus called from behind the espresso machine, already untying his apron. The assistant manager had been itching to leave since his shift started. "I've got that thing." "The thing you have every Tuesday?" Emma interrupted, managing a tired smile. She glanced at the clock above the bar, shaped like a coffin, naturally. 10:42 p.m. Go. "I'll handle the last stragglers." She gestured toward the corner booth where 2 drama students were still nursing their mochas, probably rehearsing lines. The cafe had a strict midnight closing time, but Emma had learned to be patient with the regulars. "You're a lifesaver," Marcus said, already grabbing his jacket. "Don't forget the storage room trash. The owner's been with me all week." Emma nodded, waving him off. "I know the drill." Alone now except for the murmuring couple, Emma retrieved her canvas jacket from the hook near the kitchen. The storage room sat in the back, accessible through the alley, a shortcut the staff used for deliveries and trash. She grabbed the 2 bags sitting by the rear exit, their weight familiar in her hands. The iron handle was cold against her palm as she pushed through the heavy door into the alley. The October air hit her immediately, crisp, tinged with wood smoke and the musty scent of old brick. Emma adjusted her grip on the trash bags and moved toward the dumpsters tucked against the side wall. The city at night had always felt like a held breath to Emma. She'd grown up in these streets, learned which alleys connected to which thoroughfares, where the homeless shelters were, how to walk with confidence even when fear whispered at her back. 24 years in this neighborhood meant she knew the rhythm of things, the distant bass from the club 3 blocks over, the occasional wail of sirens, the way sound seemed to pool in certain corners. She tossed the first bag into the dumpster, the metallic crash echoing off the cafe's aged brick exterior. As she lifted the second bag, a sound stopped her cold. Crying. Not the distant wail of a car alarm or a stray cat's yowl. The unmistakable, hiccuping sob of an infant. Raw, desperate, terrified. Emma's heart lurched. The trash bag slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thump at her feet. The sound came from deeper in the alley, beyond the reach of the cafe's security lights, where the passage narrowed between the buildings. "Hello." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, swallowed by fog and shadows. "Is someone there?" The crying intensified, and then she heard it. A second voice. 2 babies, not 1. Emma's feet moved before her rational mind could intervene. She edged past the dumpster, her eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness. The decorative sconces from the cafe's ornate doorway cast just enough light to paint the alley's entrance in gold, but here, 20 feet back, she was moving through pure shadow. Then she saw them. 2 bundles wrapped in ivory blankets, nestled in what looked like an old wooden crate set carefully on the dry ground beneath a fire escape. The infants inside, they couldn't have been more than a few months old, were wailing, their tiny faces scrunched with distress, hands reaching uselessly at the air. But it was the man beside them that stole Emma's breath entirely. He was slumped against the brick wall, one pale hand gripping the edge of the crate with bone-white desperation. Even in the half-light, Emma could see the unnatural shade of his skin, alabaster, almost luminous. His silver hair hung in tangled strands across his face, and his clothing looked like it belonged in a museum. Black fabric embroidered with intricate silver patterns, torn and stained dark across the left shoulder and chest. The blood, because it had to be blood, looked black in the shadows, spreading in slow rivulets down his sleeve. "Oh God," Emma breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. The cold ground bit through her jeans, but she barely registered it. Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open. Crimson. Not brown, not hazel, crimson. The color of garnets catching candlelight, burning with pain and something fiercer. Fear. Not for himself, Emma realized with a shock. For the crying infants beside him. "Please." His voice was barely above a whisper, accented in a way Emma couldn't place. Eastern European, maybe, something ancient in the vowels. "Please do not. No hospitals. They will find." His head lolled to the side, consciousness slipping like sand through fingers. Emma's hands shook as she pressed them against his shoulder, feeling the wet warmth seep between her fingers despite the cold radiating from his skin. 2 years of pre-med had taught her enough to recognize critical blood loss. The wound beneath the torn fabric looked deep, but there was something wrong about it. The edges too dark, almost burned. "I need to call 911, Emma said, more to herself than to him. She fumbled for her phone with blood-slicked fingers. "You need help."
"No."
His hand shot out with shocking strength, fingers wrapping around her wrist like a vice. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, desperate, pleading, terrified. "No police. No hospitals. They will take the children. They will." He gasped, his grip faltering. "They will kill us all." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Behind her, the infants continued their desperate chorus. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to call for help, to let trained professionals handle whatever nightmare this was. But one of the babies, the smaller one, reached a tiny fist toward her, fingers grasping at empty air. And Emma, who had spent her whole life playing it safe, keeping her head down, avoiding complications, found herself asking the question that would change everything. "Who's coming for you?" The stranger's crimson eyes flickered with something between gratitude and grief. His lips moved, shaping a single word that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "Hunters." Emma Collins didn't know it then, crouched in that alley with blood on her hands and 2 crying infants at her feet, but she had just made a choice that would pull her into a world hidden beneath the skin of her ordinary city, a world of ancient bloodlines, deadly oaths, and a wounded king who should have been nothing more than myth. She didn't know that the silver-haired stranger bleeding against the brick wall was Victor Drager, sovereign of a realm that had existed in shadow for 1,000 years. She didn't know his queen had been murdered, his throne usurped, or that the 2 infants crying in the darkness were the last heirs of a power that could reshape the balance between human and monster. All Emma knew at that moment was that she couldn't walk away. And that single act of compassion, helping a stranger into the storeroom of the vampire cafe while the city slept, unaware, would be the beginning of everything. Getting Victor inside the cafe was harder than Emma anticipated. He was taller than she'd realized, easily over 6 feet, and despite his gaunt appearance, there was a weight to him that seemed unnatural. She half-dragged, half-guided him through the side entrance, the one that opened directly into the narrow hallway leading to the storage room. The infants she carried in their makeshift crate balanced precariously against her hip while Victor leaned heavily against her shoulder. Almost there, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself. The storage room was a relic from when the building had housed a printing press, all exposed brick and old wooden shelving stacked with surplus cafe supplies. A single bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across boxes of napkins and outdated promotional materials. Emma eased Victor onto the floor against the far wall, then set the crate with the twins beside him. They had finally stopped crying, but their eyes, impossibly alert for infants, tracked her every movement. Emma grabbed the first aid kit from behind a stack of coffee bean boxes. Her hands were still shaking as she knelt beside Victor, carefully peeling back the torn fabric of his shirt to examine the wound. She froze. The gash across his shoulder wasn't just deep, it was wrong. The edges looked seared, blackened as though someone had taken a branding iron to the flesh. Dark veins spiderwebbed out from the injury, spreading beneath his too pale skin like ink in water. "What did this to you?" Emma's voice came out barely above a whisper. Victor's eyes flickered open, those unsettling crimson irises focusing on her with effort. "Forbidden weapons," he managed, each word seeming to cost him. "Silver, blessed. Made to." He grimaced, teeth clenched against pain. "To kill what should not die." Emma's medical training warred with the impossibility of his words. "I don't understand." "Silver doesn't. This looks like a chemical burn, but—" "The infants," Victor interrupted, his gaze sliding to the crate. "Their names." "Lysandra." He gestured weakly toward the smaller baby, the one who had reached for Emma in the alley. "And Merrick." The second infant, slightly larger, with a dusting of silver blonde hair that matched Victor's. "Lysandra and Merrick," Emma repeated softly, testing the names. They felt old somehow, weighted with history. She turned back to Victor, pressing gauze against his wound even though she knew it wouldn't be enough. "Who's hunting you? Why do they want to hurt children?" Victor's jaw tightened. "They fear what these children represent. What their bloodline," he broke off, gasping. "You should not be involved in this." "But I had nowhere else, nowhere they wouldn't find." A sound from the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps. Familiar footsteps. "Emma?" Diane's voice rang out, sharp with irritation. "The night manager. You still back here? I thought Marcus said you were closing." Emma's heart seized. She shot Victor a desperate look. His hand was already moving to cover the twins' mouths, though they remained eerily silent, then scrambled to her feet, slipping out the storage room door and pulling it shut behind her. Diane stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, her severely cut bob catching the fluorescent light. "What are you doing in there?" "Just," Emma's mind raced. "Checking inventory. Someone reported we were low on syrups." Diane's eyes narrowed. "At 11 at night? You know how Marcus is. Always leaving things for the next shift." Emma forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I'll be done in 5 minutes. The last customers just left." For a terrible moment, Diane looked like she might push past Emma to check the storage room herself. Then her phone buzzed, and she glanced down with an annoyed sigh.
"Fine.
Lock up properly when you're done." "And Emma?" Diane looked up, something almost concerned crossing her sharp features. "You look exhausted. Go home. Get some sleep." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Diane's footsteps retreated back toward the main cafe. Emma sagged against the storage room door, exhaling shakily. That was too close. She needed to figure out what to do with Victor and the twins, needed to understand what she'd stumbled into. The cafe's entry bell chimed. Emma's blood went cold. They were closed. The sign was flipped. The door should have been locked. She moved quickly down the hallway, emerging into the main cafe space. Diane stood behind the counter, frozen mid-motion, staring at the 3 figures who had just entered. Emma understood Diane's hesitation immediately. The first was a man in his late 30s, dark-haired and immaculately dressed in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. Everything about him was controlled, precise, from the way he held himself to the slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. When those eyes scanned the cafe, Emma felt like prey being assessed by something that had perfected the art of hunting. The second was a woman, rail-thin and sharp-featured, with auburn hair pulled into a severe ponytail. She moved like a blade, efficient, dangerous, her gaze cutting across every shadow and corner with methodical intensity. The third barely fit through the doorframe. Massive, didn't quite cover it. Silent, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and the kind of stillness that suggested violence held on a very short leash. "We're closed," Diane said, but her voice wavered. The dark-haired man smiled, and it was worse than if he'd threatened them. "We won't take much of your time. We're looking for someone." He produced a phone, showing an image that Emma couldn't see from her position near the hallway. Tall, pale, probably injured. He may have been seen in this area tonight. Emma's heart hammered so hard, she was certain they could hear it. Diane glanced at the phone, then shook her head. "Haven't seen anyone like that. Have you, Emma?" 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Emma Collins, who had never lied to anyone about anything that mattered, looked directly at the dark-haired man and felt the words come out smooth as glass. "No." Just the regular evening crowd. College students, mostly. The man studied her for a long moment. Emma forced herself to hold his gaze, to keep her breathing steady, to ignore the way her palms were sweating. "I'm Lucien Ward," he said finally, producing a business card and setting it on the counter. "If you remember anything, or if anyone unusual comes by, please call. It's quite urgent." The woman, Helena, Emma would learn later, drifted closer, her movements predatory. "He's dangerous," she said quietly, still scanning the cafe. "If you've seen him, protecting him would be a mistake." "We haven't seen anyone," Emma repeated, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Bram, the massive silent one, moved toward the hallway where Emma stood. She fought every instinct to step back, to block his path. Instead, she smiled politely. "Restrooms are for customers only," she said. Bram stopped, his eyes colorless, empty, fixed on her face. Then he turned back to the others. Lucien nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time." He moved toward the door, Helena following. But she paused at the threshold, turning back to look directly at Emma. "If you see him," Helena said, her voice soft and absolutely lethal, "don't be a hero." Then they were gone, the bell chiming cheerfully in their wake. Emma stood frozen for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. What the hell was that? Diane breathed. Emma didn't answer. She was already turning back toward the storage room, toward the wounded stranger and the twins with ancient names, toward the choice she'd somehow already made without fully understanding it. Behind her, Diane called out something about locking the doors, about calling the police if anything fell off. But Emma was already gone, slipping back into the shadows where crimson eyes watched her approach with gratitude and fear, and 2 infants who should have been crying remained impossibly, eerily silent. Emma locked the storage room door behind her and sagged against it, her heart still racing from the encounter with the hunters. When she turned back, Victor had deteriorated. His head lolled against the brick wall, silver hair plastered his forehead with sweat that seemed too cold, too wrong. His breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. The blackened veins from his wound had spread further, creeping up his neck like dark fingers. Hey, stay with me." Emma dropped to her knees beside him, checking his pulse. It was there, but faint and irregular, beating to a rhythm that didn't quite match human physiology. "Those people, the ones who just came in, are they the hunters you mentioned?" Victor's eyes rolled beneath closed lids. When he spoke, his voice was distant, fractured. "Ward, always Ward finds the scent. Helena sees in darkness." Bram. He shuddered. "They swore the blood oath." "Cannot stop." "Cannot." "Victor." Emma gripped his shoulders, careful to avoid the wound. "I need you to focus. Tell me what's happening. What are you?" His eyes snapped open, crimson irises unfocused. "Draeger," he whispered, and the name seemed to carry weight, seeming to press against the air itself. Victor Draeger. Last of the sovereign line. Last of, his breath hitched. The realm will fall. Without the throne, without the bloodline to anchor. Emma sat back on her heels. You're delirious. You've lost too much blood. Not blood, Victor interrupted, his hand clutching at his chest. Life force. They used blessed silver. Burns away what sustains us. What keeps us, he grimaced. Bound to this world. This isn't making sense. Emma's voice rose despite herself. You need a hospital. Real doctors. I can't help you with whatever this is. I am the Vampire King. The words hung in the air between them. Emma stared at him. Then, despite everything, the impossible wound, the crimson eyes, the hunters who moved like predators, she laughed. It came out sharp, edged with hysteria.
Right.
And I'm a witch. Victor, you're in shock. You need. Victor stopped breathing. Not the shallow gasps of before, nothing. His chest stilled completely. His eyes remained open but unseeing, fixed on some point beyond the ceiling. Seconds ticked by.
5, 10,
15. Emma's medical training kicked into autopilot. She checked for a pulse, nothing. Positioned her hands for chest compressions. Victor inhaled. Not a gasp, not a desperate gulp of air. A deep, purposeful breath that seemed to pull the very atmosphere into his lungs with supernatural force. The bare bulb above flickered. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Emma's breath misted in the sudden cold. His eyes found hers, fully focused now, burning with an intensity that made her stumble backward. I am not what you understand as human, Victor said, his voice stronger now, resonant in a way that seemed to echo in her bones. The Draeger bloodline has ruled the hidden realm for 8 centuries. We are the anchor between the shadow world and this one. And I, his expression crumbled. I am the last adult heir. The last who can hold the throne. Emma's back pressed against a stack of supply boxes. Her hands shook. This is insane. Vampires aren't, they're stories. Halloween costumes and bad movies. Is the wound on my shoulder a story? Victor's eyes dropped to Lysandra and Merrick, still impossibly silent in their crate. Are my children fantasies? Is the way those hunters moved, the way they smelled the air, tracked what human senses cannot perceive, is that fiction? Emma opened her mouth, closed it. Everything she'd witnessed tonight played through her mind in rapid succession. The blackened wound, the too-cold skin, the way the hunters had entered the cafe like they were following invisible threads. Victor's crimson eyes, the moment he'd stopped breathing. Your queen, Emma heard herself say. You mentioned her earlier. Something broke in Victor's expression. Serafina. Her name was a prayer, a wound. She was murdered 3 nights ago. In our own chambers. By those we trusted. Council members who decided the Draeger line had ruled long enough. His hands clenched into fists. They came for me during her funeral rites. Came for the twins while they were still covered in their mother's blood. The twins. Emma's gaze fell to them. Lysandra and Merrick, watching with those 2 aware eyes. They wanted to kill babies? They wanted to end the bloodline entirely. Victor's voice hardened. Without heirs, the throne passes to the council. Without the Draeger line to anchor the accords, the balance between realms collapses. War follows. Chaos follows. He closed his eyes. I fled with only what I could carry. My children. My life. Nothing else. Emma's mind reeled. Part of her still wanted to dismiss this as the ravings of a dying man. But the evidence was impossible to ignore. The supernatural wound, the moment he'd stopped breathing, the way reality itself seemed to bend around him. Why here? She whispered. Why this alley, this cafe? I felt it. Victor's eyes opened, meeting hers. The threshold between worlds runs beneath this place. The building sits on old ground, ground that remembers what came before your city. I thought. He swallowed. I thought I could hide long enough to heal, to plan, to find allies. His laugh was bitter. I managed one night before the hunters found my trail. Emma stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air, needing space to process the impossible thing he was telling her. I can't, this is too much. I need to think. Merrick began to cry. The sound was startling after so much eerie silence. Not supernatural or strange, just the desperate, hiccuping wail of a frightened infant. The sound went straight through Emma's chest, bypassing logic and reason entirely. She moved without thinking, lifting Merrick from the crate. He was warm in her arms, solid and real. She rocked him instinctively, murmuring nonsense words. Sure, it's okay. You're safe. I've got you. Marek's crying subsided almost immediately. He nestled against her chest, one tiny fist gripping the fabric of her shirt, and his eyes, crimson like his father's, drifted closed. When Emma looked up, Victor was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Grief and wonder, and something else, something that looked like desperate hope. He never calms that quickly, Victor said softly. Not even for me. Serafina could soothe him instantly, but since his voice caught. He's been inconsolable. Emma looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. At Lysandra, who had also settled, watching them with peaceful curiosity. At Victor, ancient and wounded, and impossibly real. What did I just pull myself into? She whispered. But she already knew the answer. Everything had changed the moment she'd heard crying in the alley. The moment she'd chosen not to walk away. There was no going back now, not with hunters searching the streets, not with a vampire king bleeding in her storage room, not with two infants who looked at her like she was something precious and necessary. Emma Collins had spent 24 years playing it safe. That life, she realized with a clarity that was almost painful, had just ended. Emma settled Merrick back into the crate beside his sister, then turned to face Victor with a steadiness she didn't quite feel. Tell me everything. If I'm risking my life for this, for you, I need to understand what I'm up against. Victor nodded slowly, some of the delirium clearing from his eyes. The realm I come from exists in the spaces between your world and shadow. We are not the monsters from your stories. We are older than those tales, the source from which they spring. He shifted against the wall, wincing. For centuries, the Draeger line maintained balance. We ruled with the consent of the council, mediated disputes, upheld the ancient accords that keep our kind hidden. What changed? Emma asked. Power always corrupts. Victor's expression darkened. 3 council members, Lord Casimir, Lady Morgrave, and the war chief Constantine, decided they could rule better without royal oversight. They gathered supporters, whispered promises of a new order. And then, his hand moved to his wounded shoulder. They struck. Emma knelt beside him again, examining the blackened wound in the harsh light. You said it was poisoned, silver and something else? Blessed silver infused with nightshade venom. Victor's voice tightened. A weapon specifically designed to kill immortals. It burns through our regenerative abilities, turns our own life force against us. Without treatment, I have perhaps 3 days before he didn't finish. Then we need to find you a treatment. Emma reached for the first aid kit again, knowing it was inadequate but needing to do something. There has to be someone in your realm who can help. Anyone I trusted is dead or a traitor. The flatness in his voice was worse than rage. I have no allies left. Emma dampened clean gauze with bottled water, carefully dabbing at the wound's edges. Victor went rigid, his jaw clenching so hard she heard his teeth grind. He tried to maintain composure, tried to breathe through it, and failed. A sound escaped him, something between a gasp and a suppressed scream. I'm sorry, Emma murmured, but she didn't stop. The wound needed cleaning, even if her supplies couldn't truly heal it. The castle, Victor said suddenly, his voice strained. Emma realized he was talking to distract himself from the pain. Castle Draeger sits on a cliff above the Shadowmere Sea. Black stone, older than recorded history. I was crowned there 2 centuries ago. Emma's hands stilled. 2 centuries. The council came at dawn, Victor continued, his eyes distant now, seeing something beyond the storage room walls. They knelt before the throne, pledging loyalty as they had 1,000 times before. Serafina stood beside me. She was laughing, she was laughing at something Lady Moregrave said. Some joke about the spring festival. His breathing quickened. Emma resumed her cleaning, more gently now. The bells rang for midday. We walked together through the great hall, Serafina's hand in mine. The twins in the royal nursery with their attendants. Everything was, his voice cracked. Everything was normal. Emma watched his face transform, grief and horror bleeding through his controlled expression. The fire started in the East Wing. A diversion. By the time we realized, soldiers were already in the corridors. Not strangers, our own guard. Men who'd served my family for decades. Victor's hands clenched. Casimir himself came for me in the throne room. Fought me with blessed silver while the castle burned. And Serafina? Emma asked quietly. Victor's eyes closed. She ran to the nursery. I heard her calling their names, Lysandra, Merrick. I heard. He stopped, swallowed hard. I heard her scream. Just once. Then nothing. The silence in the storage room was absolute except for the twins' soft breathing. I found her in the nursery hallway. Victor's voice had gone hollow. They'd cut her down like she was nothing. Like 8 decades of rule, of wisdom, of life meant nothing. The twins were still in their cribs crying. Constantine's men were climbing the stairs. Emma realized she'd stopped cleaning the wound entirely, her hands frozen, throat tight. I grabbed my children and I ran. Victor opened his eyes, meeting hers. Like a coward, I took the servant passages and I ran. Left my realm burning. Left my queen's body unburied. Ran through the threshold into your world with nothing but the clothes I wore and the twins in my arms. That's not cowardice, Emma said fiercely. That's survival. That's protecting your children. I dragged you into this. Victor's gaze held hers. You, who have no stake in realm politics or ancient feuds. I had no right to. You didn't drag me anywhere, Emma interrupted. I made a choice, and I'm making another one right now. She secured the fresh bandage over his wound. I'm going to my apartment. It's 2 blocks from here. I'll get real medical supplies, food, water. Things we'll need if you're going to survive long enough to figure out what comes next. Victor shook his head. It's too dangerous. The hunters are looking for you, not me. Emma stood, brushing off her jeans. I'll be careful. Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me. Understand? For a moment, Victor looked like he might argue. Then he simply nodded. Thank you, Emma Collins. He hesitated. I will not forget this kindness. Emma managed a small smile. Save the gratitude until after I get back alive. She slipped out of the storage room, locking it from the outside with her manager key. The cafe was dark now, empty except for shadows cast by the street lights through the stained glass windows. Emma grabbed her bag from behind the counter and moved to the front entrance. The fog had thickened while she'd been inside, transforming the street into something from another era. Emma stepped out into the cold autumn air, pulling her jacket tighter. She made it half a block before she saw her. Helena Cross stood on the roof of the vintage bookshop across the street, a dark silhouette against the amberlit fog. She was perfectly still, head tilted as if listening to something beyond human hearing. Then, slowly, deliberately, her gaze swept across the street, toward the Vampire Cafe. Emma forced herself to keep walking, to maintain her normal pace, to not run or freeze or do anything that might draw attention. 2 blocks. She just needed to make it 2 blocks to her apartment, get supplies, and return before. Helena's head turned. For one terrible heartbeat, their eyes met across the distance. Then Emma rounded the corner, pulse hammering, and the hunter disappeared from view. But the message was clear. They were being watched. and time was running out. Emma made it to her apartment in record time, threw supplies into a backpack, bandages, antiseptic, bottled water, energy bars, a spare blanket, and practically ran back through the fog-shrouded streets. Helena was no longer visible on the rooftop, which somehow made everything worse. She was half a block from the cafe when she saw them. All three hunters stood at the front entrance. Lucien was testing the door, locked, thank God, while Helena peered through the stained glass windows, hands cupped around her eyes. Bram simply stood sentinel, that massive frame blocking most of the doorway. Emma's stomach dropped. She'd left the cafe closed, dark. Coming back now would require explanation. But she had no choice. She approached from the side street, keys jingling deliberately to announce her presence. "Can I help you?" Three heads turned in unison. Lucien's expression shifted into something approximating friendly concern, but his eyes remained calculating. "Ah, we meet again. Working late. Forgot my phone." Emma held up the device, grateful she'd thought to pull it from her pocket. "Can't sleep without setting 17 alarms, you know how it is." She moved past them to unlock the door, hyper-aware of their proximity. Helena's gaze tracked her movements like a cat watching a mouse. Emma's hands shook slightly as she turned the key. From fear or cold, she couldn't say. "Since you're here," Lucien said smoothly, "might we come in?" "Just for a moment. We have a few more questions." Every instinct screamed at Emma to refuse. But refusing would be suspicious. And they were hunters. If they wanted in, a locked door probably wouldn't stop them. "Sure," Emma heard herself say. "But I really can't stay long." She flipped on the lights. The cafe's gothic ambience looked almost ridiculous in her current state of terror. Fake candelabras and velvet curtains playing in the darkness, while real monsters walked through the door. "Can I get you anything?" Emma moved behind the counter, kneading the barrier between them. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be lovely," Lucien said, settling onto a bar stool with unnerving grace. Helena remained standing, still scanning every corner, while Bram positioned himself near the hallway.
Too near the hallway.
Emma's hands worked on autopilot, grinding beans, heating water, trying not to think about Victor hidden 20 feet away. Could he hear them? Smell them? Did he know the hunters were this close? In the storeroom, Victor's eyes snapped open. The scent hit him like a physical blow, blessed silver, unmistakable and nauseating. His wound pulsed with renewed agony, the venom recognizing its source. The twins stirred restlessly, sensing his distress. He placed a trembling hand over each of them, willing them to silence. "Your coworker mentioned something interesting earlier," Lucien said conversationally as Emma set coffee mugs on the counter. "Said she saw you bringing someone in through the side entrance." Around closing time, Emma's heart seized, but she forced a laugh. "Diane?"
She saw the food delivery guy.
"Our supplier was running late, brought the weekend pastry order right as we were closing." The lie came easier this time, details flowing naturally. "I had to sign for it, got everything put away." Total pain. A food delivery. Helena's voice was flat, disbelieving. At that hour. Welcome to the restaurant industry. Emma met her gaze steadily, channeling every ounce of exhausted server she'd ever been. Suppliers don't care about convenient timing. They show up when they show up. Lucien sipped his coffee, studying Emma over the rim. "You seem nervous." 3 strangers showed up at my closed workplace asking about dangerous people. "I'm alone." "Yeah, I'm nervous." Emma crossed her arms. "Look, I want to help if someone's in danger, but I haven't seen anyone matching your description. Just regular customers and a late delivery. That's it." In the storeroom, Victor fought to control his breathing. The silver scent grew stronger. One of them was moving closer to the door. His body screamed at him to run, to fight, to protect his children. But moving meant discovery. Discovery meant death. He gathered what little strength remained, muscles coiling. If the door opened, he would have one chance to strike before the poison took him. One chance to buy Emma and the twins time to escape. The thing is, Lucien continued, his tone still pleasant, we have reason to believe our target came to this specific location. The trail led us here. And it's quite difficult to lose once we have it. Bram had drifted even closer to the hallway now, his massive head tilted, as if listening. Or smelling. Emma's mind raced. She needed to redirect him, and needed to get him away from that door. Actually, she said loudly, if you're going to keep poking around, you should know the bathroom's been having issues. Pipe leak or something. Manager's been meaning to call maintenance. She gestured toward the hallway. Fair warning before anyone wanders back there and steps in water. It was weak, but it was something. Bram paused, his colorless eyes sliding to Emma, then to Lucien. Lucien's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Calculation, suspicion, and perhaps a grudging respect. He stood smoothly. We've taken enough of your time. Thank you for the coffee. That's it. Helena turned to him sharply. Lucien, the scent is old, Lucien interrupted calmly. If he was here, he'd have moved on. We're wasting time. He produced another business card, sliding it across the counter to Emma. But do call if you remember anything. Anything at all. The man we're looking for is extremely dangerous. To himself and others. Emma pocketed the card with fingers that had gone numb. I'll keep an eye out. Helena looked like she wanted to argue, but Lucien was already moving toward the door. Bram followed without question, though he cast one last, lingering look down the hallway. The bell chimed as they left. Emma stood frozen behind the counter, counting heartbeats.
10, 20, 30.
She moved to the window, peering through the stained glass. The hunters stood on the sidewalk, conferring. Helena gestured sharply toward the cafe. Lucien shook his head, said something Emma couldn't hear. Then they walked away, disappearing into the fog. Emma waited another full minute before she moved. Her legs felt like water as she rushed down the hallway and unlocked the storage room door. Victor was crouched in the corner, one hand braced against the wall, the other hovering protectively over the twins. His face was sheet white, pupils blown wide with pain and adrenaline. The wound had started bleeding again, fresh blood seeping through the bandage. They're gone, Emma whispered. Victor's body sagged with relief. I heard. I thought. He closed his eyes. I thought I would have to fight. You couldn't have fought them in your condition. I would have tried. Victor's gaze moved to his children. For them, I would have died trying. Emma knelt beside him, already pulling fresh supplies from her backpack. Well, you don't have to die today. But Victor? She waited until he met her eyes. They're not convinced. Helena, especially. They'll be back. I know. Victor's expression hardened with grim determination. Which means we cannot stay here much longer. We need a plan. Emma nodded, hands steadying as she began to clean his wound again. Then let's make one. Because I'm not letting them take you. Any of you. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like something alive. And somewhere in its depths, 3 hunters regrouped, circled closer, and waited for their prey to make a mistake. Emma had just finished rebandaging Victor's shoulder when his entire body convulsed. It happened without warning. One moment, he was leaning against the wall. The next he was seizing, his back arching violently as the blackened veins spread like wildfire across his chest and up his neck. His eyes rolled back, showing only crimson-tinged white. Victor! Emma grabbed his shoulders, trying to steady him. His skin had gone from cold to ice. What's happening? What should I do? The seizure lasted only seconds, but when it ended, Victor lay gasping, his breath coming in wet, rattling sounds. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. The poison's spreading faster than I thought. The proximity to the silver weapons, it accelerated the process. How do I stop it? Emma's hands moved frantically, checking his pulse, his breathing, anything she could measure. There has to be something. There is. Victor's hand caught hers, his grip weak. A ritual, old magic, requires 3 components. Each word seemed to cost him. Vampire blood, my own. Sigils drawn in a specific pattern. And he hesitated. A mortal willing to share their life force. Emma's mind raced through the implications. Share life force. That means binding yourself to me temporarily. Letting your mortality counteract the poison's immortal killing properties. Victor's eyes found hers. It's dangerous. If something goes wrong, the ritual could drain you completely.
Kill you.
I won't ask. I'll do it. The words were out before he finished. Victor's expression shifted, shock, then something fiercer. Emma, you don't understand what you're offering. Your children need you alive. Emma's voice was steady, certain. That's all I need to understand. Tell me what to do. You don't know me. You met me hours ago in an alley. I know you protected your children instead of yourself. Emma squeezed his hand. I know you're dying to save them. I know those hunters will kill them if they find them unprotected. That's enough. Now tell me how this works before you collapse again. Victor stared at her for a long moment, something like wonder breaking through his pain. Then he nodded. Help me sit up. And find something to draw with, anything that can mark the floor. Emma found a box of chalk they used for the daily specials board. Victor directed her with weakening instructions, his voice fading as she drew. The pattern was intricate, interlocking circles, ancient symbols that seemed to writhe even as she sketched them. The chalk felt wrong in her hands, too heavy, too cold. Your hand, Victor said when she'd finished. I need your hand. Emma knelt in the center of the sigils and extended her palm. Victor produced a small blade from somewhere in his torn jacket, ornate, ancient, the metal darker than steel. He pressed it to his own palm first, crimson blood welling immediately, then held the blade to Emma's hand. Last chance, he whispered. You can still walk away. Draw the blood, Emma said. The blade cut shallow but precise. Their palms met, blood mingling, hers warm and red, his cold and somehow other. Victor began to speak in a language Emma didn't recognize, words that felt older than civilization itself. The temperature plummeted. The light bulb overhead flickered, casting the storage room in strobing shadows. The chalk lines began to glow, not brightly, but with a sickly phosphorescence that made Emma's stomach turn. Energy crawled up her arm from their joined hands, electric and wrong and hungry. Lysandra and Merrick had been fussing, but now they fell utterly silent. Emma glanced at them. Both infants watched the ritual with eyes too knowing, too calm, as if they understood exactly what was happening. Victor's chanting intensified. The shadows in the corners of the room began to move independently, reaching toward them like living things. Emma felt the energy pull harder, felt something essential being drawn from her core. And then the visions hit. She saw a throne room carved from obsidian, massive and cold and beautiful. Saw Victor centuries younger, crown upon his head, power radiating from him like heat from a star. Saw a woman with midnight hair and eyes like amber, Serafina, laughing as she danced through corridors lined with silver torches. The vision shifted violently. Fire. Screaming. Serafina runs through smoke-filled halls, calling for her children. Victor is fighting in the throne room, surrounded by betrayers wearing friendly faces. Blood on stone. The queen's body crumpled in a nursery doorway, her eyes still open, still beautiful, still wrong. Another shift, hunters through the centuries. Not just Lucian, Helena, and Bram, but dozens before them. Vampire families destroyed, bloodlines ended, ancient beings reduced to ash and memory. The hunters were relentless, righteous, convinced of their holy mission. Emma saw the Draeger lines stretching back through time, kings and queens, each one bearing the same crimson eyes, the same terrible burden of keeping peace between worlds. She felt Victor's grief like it was her own, tasted his desperation, understood with sudden clarity exactly what he'd sacrificed by choosing to flee instead of fight. The ritual reached its crescendo. Emma's vision whited out with pain as something vital tore free from her chest and poured into Victor. She heard herself scream, or maybe it was him, or maybe it was both of them. Silence. Emma came back to herself slowly. She was on her hands and knees, gasping, her palm burning where their blood had mixed. The chalk sigils had blackened, as if burned from within. The shadows had retreated to their normal corners. Victor lay beside her, equally exhausted, but when she looked at his wound, the blackened veins had receded. Not gone, but no longer spreading. His breathing was deeper, steadier. He would live.
For now.
Emma. Victor's voice was hoarse. What you just did. What you just sacrificed. Don't. Emma cut him off, her own voice shaking. Don't thank me yet. I saw. She closed her eyes against the lingering images. I saw everything. Your wife. The betrayal. The throne. I saw. Her voice broke. God. Victor, I saw what you lost. Victor pushed himself into a sitting position with obvious effort. When he looked at her, his crimson eyes were bright with unshed tears. Then you understand why I cannot fail. Why must they survive? His gaze moved to the twins, now sleeping peacefully despite everything. They are all that remains. Emma nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. The storage room felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the ritual had changed the very air. She realized with startling clarity that she'd crossed a threshold. She wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. She was bound to this, to him, to whatever came next. The hunters will come back, she said quietly. The ritual bought you time, but not much. We need a real plan. Victor's expression hardened with determination. Then we make one. Together. The word hung between them. Together. Carrying more weight than Emma had expected. She met his eyes and nodded once. She was no longer just a bystander in someone else's war. She was in it now, blood-bound and vision-scarred and absolutely, terrifyingly committed to seeing this through. Whatever the cost. Emma didn't realize how much time had passed until she heard voices in the main cafe. She and Victor had been sitting in exhausted silence, recovering from the ritual, when the sounds filtered through. Laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, the cheerful chime of the entry bell. The late-night crowd had arrived. College students seeking caffeine for all-night study sessions, insomniacs looking for company, the usual nocturnal regulars who kept the Vampire Cafe profitable after midnight. What time is it? Emma whispered, checking her phone. 1:47 a.m. She'd been gone for hours. Diane would have questions. Footsteps in the hallway. Not the casual shuffle of staff, but purposeful, measured steps. Emma's blood turned to ice. Victor heard it too. His hand moved to the twins, gathering them close. Emma, he breathed, get behind me.
No.
Emma positioned herself between Victor and the door, scanning the storage room desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. A broken chair leg. A heavy stapler. Pathetic, but it was something. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Emma held her breath, watching the doorknob. In the cafe beyond, someone left. Music played softly. Normal life continued, oblivious to the predators in the hallway. A hand touched the doorknob from the outside. Lucien's voice, barely audible through the door. Here. Emma heard him inhale deeply, deliberately. When he spoke again, there was dark satisfaction in his tone. The blood scent is strongest here. Ritual magic, too, recent, very recent. Helena's whisper carried through the wood like a blade. He's here. I smell the blood. Inside the storeroom, Victor's entire body tensed. His crimson eyes locked onto Emma's, and she saw him making a decision, one she didn't like. He shifted the twins carefully, preparing to move, to do something suicidally brave. No, Emma mouthed silently, shaking her head. The doorknob began to turn. Emma's hand closed around the stapler. Ridiculous, useless. But she raised it anyway, heart hammering so hard she could barely hear. This was it. She was about to fight immortal hunters with office supplies while protecting a vampire king and his infant children. The absurdity would have been funny if she wasn't absolutely terrified. The door started to open. Lucien. A crash from the main cafe, followed by Marcus's panicked voice. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. The whole pot just..." The pressure on the doorknob released instantly. Emma heard Lucien's sharp exhale, then his footsteps retreating rapidly down the hall. Through the door, she heard the chaos, scalding coffee everywhere, Marcus apologizing profusely, customers exclaiming, general pandemonium. Emma sagged against the wall, legs trembling. That was too close. Impossibly, miraculously close. But the hunters hadn't left. She could hear them in the cafe. Lucien's voice calm despite being apparently drenched in coffee, Helena's sharper tones cutting through Marcus's continued apologies. They were still here. Still hunting. Victor's voice was barely a whisper. "Emma, listen to me carefully." She turned. His expression was resolute in a way that made her stomach drop. "I'm going to surrender myself," Victor said quietly. "I'll go out there, lead them away from you and the children. You'll take Lysandra and Merrick somewhere safe." "Absolutely not." "Emma."
No.
Her voice was fierce, final. "You just told me those hunters kill entire bloodlines. What do you think happens to your children if you're dead? They don't get mercy. They get exterminated." Victor's jaw clenched. "Then what do you suggest?" "They know I'm here. They're not leaving. It's only a matter of time before." The basement. Emma's mind raced, pulling up memories of the building's layout. There's an old supply basement that connects to the building next door, the abandoned textile factory. The owner showed it to me during my first week, said to stay out because it's not structurally sound. She met Victor's eyes. "But it's a way out. If we can get to it without them seeing. The hallway is monitored. We'd never make it. Not through the hallway." Emma moved to the far corner of the storeroom, pulling away a stack of boxes. Behind them was a ventilation grate, large enough for a person. The old HVAC system runs through the walls. It's not in use anymore. The cafe had it replaced years ago. But the ducts still connect to the basement access. Victor stared at the grate. "You want to crawl through ventilation ducts? You have a better idea?" In the cafe, Helena's voice drifted closer. "Lucien, we can't wait much longer. If he's recovering, if he's had help." "I know." Lucien's tone was sharp. "Bram, check that hallway again. Every door, every corner. Footsteps coming their way. Heavy ones." Victor looked from the grate to his children to Emma. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the desperate mathematics of survival. "I'm too weak to carry them both through ducts. Then I'll carry one. You take the other. We move quietly, we move fast." Emma was already unscrewing the grate with a coin from her pocket, hands working frantically. "It's not a perfect plan, but it's the only one we have." The footsteps were closer now. Bram's massive shadow passed by the door crack. Victor gathered Lysandra in one arm, wrapping her carefully against his chest. Emma did the same with Merrick, feeling the infant's warmth through her shirt, his tiny heartbeat against hers. He looked at her with those unsettling crimson eyes and didn't make a sound, as if he understood the danger. The grate came free with a soft screech of metal. "Emma," Victor whispered as she helped him toward the opening. "If we're separated, if something happens to me..." "Nothing's happening to you," Emma interrupted. "We're all getting out of this. Together." The doorknob rattled. Bram, testing it. Emma practically shoved Victor into the duct, then climbed in after him, pulling the grate back into place just as the door began to open. Through the slats, she saw Bram's massive form fill the doorway, saw him scan the apparently empty storeroom with those colorless, dead eyes. Emma pressed her hand over Marek's back, willing him to stay silent. Beside her in the darkness, Victor did the same with Lysandra. Bram stepped into the room, his footsteps heavy. He moved with methodical precision, checking behind boxes, running his hand along walls. He stopped directly in front of the grate. Emma's heart stopped beating entirely. Through the slats, she could see his boots, inches from her face. One of his hands moved toward the grate. Bram, Helena called from the cafe. We're leaving. He's not here. A pause that lasted an eternity. Then Bram grunted and turned away. Emma didn't breathe until she heard the storeroom door close. Didn't move until the hunter's footsteps faded down the hall. Even then, she waited another full minute before whispering, "Let's go."
Now.
Before they changed their minds. And they crawled forward into darkness, toward the basement, toward uncertain escape, with hunters at their backs and nowhere left to hide. The ventilation ducts were worse than Emma had imagined, cramped, dark, and filled with decades of dust that made every breath a struggle not to cough. She crawled forward with Merrick pressed against her chest, following the faint outline of Victor ahead of her, Lysandra's small form barely visible in his arms. The metal groaned beneath their weight. Emma's knees screamed in protest, her shoulders scraping against the narrow walls. But she kept moving, counting turns, trying to remember the building's layout from memory. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Victor stopped. "Here," he whispered. "I see the access panel." He kicked it open carefully, the metal falling away with a clang that echoed too loudly in the confined space. They dropped down into the basement one at a time, Victor first, then Emma handing him Merrick before climbing down herself. The basement was exactly as Emma remembered, concrete floors, exposed pipes, old supply crates stacked against water-stained walls. A single emergency light cast everything in sickly green. The air smelled of mildew and rot. But there on the far wall was the door to the textile factory. Their way out. Emma retrieved Merrick from Victor, who looked ready to collapse. The ritual had helped, but he was still dangerously weak. She could see it in the way he moved, the tremor in his hands as he steadied himself against a support beam. "Rest for a minute," Emma said quietly. "Just a minute, then we'll go." Victor nodded, sliding down to sit with his back against the wall. Lysandra had finally begun to fuss, soft whimpers that seemed heartbreakingly loud in the silence. He rocked her gently, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight Emma hadn't heard before. "Serafina had a gift," he said. She could see fragments of the future, not clearly, not with certainty, but enough. The night the twins were born, she told me something that terrified me. Emma sat down beside him, adjusting Merrick in her arms. What did she see? That our children would either save the realm or destroy it entirely. Victor's eyes were distant. That the council would fear them for this reason. That their very existence would spark war. He looked down at Lysandra. She saw her own death too, I think. She never said it explicitly, but in those final weeks, she held them differently. Like she was memorizing every moment. Emma's throat tightened. "Victor, the council fears them because Lysandra and Merrick are twins," Victor continued. "In our kind, twins are prophesied. They hold power that exceeds even royal blood, power to reshape the fundamental laws that govern our realm. The council knew this. They couldn't control what the twins might become, so they decided to eliminate the threat entirely." He closed his eyes, and Emma saw tears track down his pale face. "I survived when Serafina didn't. I ran when a king should have stood and fought. I abandoned my throne, my realm, my people, all of it because I couldn't bear to lose them too." His voice cracked. "What kind of king does that make me?" "The kind who understands that some things matter more than crowns," Emma said softly. "The kind who chooses love over pride. That's not a weakness, Victor. That's humanity." Victor's laugh was bitter. "I'm not human."
No.
"But you're father. And fathers protect their children, whatever the cost." Victor turned to look at her then, really look at her, and something shifted in his expression. "I have allies scattered across the realm, or I did. Loyalists who might still honor the Draeger name. But I don't know who survived the purge, who turned traitor, who can be trusted." He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on Marek's back. "Yet I trust you." A mortal I met hours ago in an alley. I trust you more than anyone still breathing in my own world. Why is that? Emma felt the weight of his gaze, the impossible intimacy of the question. I don't know, she whispered. But I'm terrified, Victor. I'm terrified of those hunters, of magic I don't understand, of a world I didn't know existed until tonight. I'm terrified I'll make the wrong choice and get you killed, or the twins hurt, or... Her voice broke. But I can't walk away. I tried to convince myself I could, back in that storeroom, and I can't. So here we are. Victor's fingers tightened on hers. Here we are. The moment stretched between them, fragile and profound, then shattered by the sound of metal scraping above them. They both looked up. The ventilation duct they just crawled through was moving, vibrating with new weight. Someone was following their path. They found the duct, Emma breathed. Victor was already moving, gathering Lysandra close despite his weakness.
The door. Now.
We can still. The basement door, the one from the cafe side, slammed open. Lucien stood silhouetted in the doorway, Helena and Bram flanking him. Behind them, Emma could see the cafe's storage hallway and could hear distant music from the oblivious crowd upstairs. Clever, Lucien said, his voice carrying easily across the basement. But not clever enough. Victor pushed Emma behind him, his body positioning itself between her and the hunters despite the fact that he could barely stand. Let them go, he said, and suddenly he sounded different, regal, commanding, every inch the king he claimed to be. You want me? The Draeger line ends with me. Let the mortal and the children go. The children are the reason we're here, Helena said coldly, already moving to flank their position. You know that. Victor's hands trembled, but his voice remained steady.
Emma, take them.
The factory door. Run, and don't look back.
No.
Emma's voice was firm, final. Emma, please. No. She moved to stand beside him, Merrick still in her arms, facing the hunters with terror and defiance warring in her chest. I'm not leaving you to die. Victor looked at her with something between anguish and wonder. You don't understand what you're. Lysandra's tiny hand reached out from Victor's arms, grasping toward Emma. Merrick echoed the gesture, both infants stretching toward her with uncanny synchronization. As if choosing her, as if saying stay. Emma felt something shift in her chest, the bond from the ritual. Maybe, or something deeper. Something that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the choice she'd made in that alley hours ago. I'm staying, she said quietly, meeting Victor's crimson eyes. We fight together or we don't fight at all. Lucien began to advance, silver blade gleaming in his hand. Helena moved to cut off the factory exit. Bram's massive form blocked the cafe door. They were trapped. Victor looked at his children, at Emma, at the hunters closing in from all sides. Emma saw him making calculations, weighing options, preparing for a last stand he couldn't possibly win. Together, she whispered, shoulder pressed against his. Victor's expression hardened with resolve. Together, he agreed. And as the hunters converged, Emma Collins, 24-year-old waitress, ordinary in every way, prepared to fight for a vampire king, his prophesied children, and a world she'd only just discovered existed. Whatever the cost. The basement had become a tomb, 4 walls, 3 hunters, and nowhere left to run. Victor handed Lysandra to Emma with trembling hands, both infants now cradled against her chest. He straightened despite his weakness, and Emma watched something transform in him. The wounded fugitive disappeared, replaced by something ancient and terrible and beautiful. A king facing his executioners. Victor Draeger, sovereign of the Shadowmere realm, keeper of the ancient accords, last in my line. His voice rang with power that shouldn't have been possible given his condition. Surrender myself to your blades. But I invoke the old law. Witnesses cannot be harmed unless they strike first. The mortal goes free. The children go free. Take only me. Lucien stopped mid-step, and Emma saw something flicker across his face.
Surprise.
And underneath it, reluctant respect. The old law, Helena hissed. He's trying to. I know what he's doing, Lucian interrupted quietly. His eyes never left Victor. But he invoked it correctly. If we harm the mortal or the children without provocation, we break our own oath. The Order would hunt us in turn. Then we wait for them to attack, Bram rumbled. They'll have to eventually.
No.
Emma's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stepped forward, positioning herself beside Victor instead of behind him. He's not alone. And he's not surrendering. Victor turned sharply. Emma, what are you? You told me about the old law in your visions. Emma's mind raced through the fragments she'd seen during the ritual. Ancient accords, magical compulsions, rules that bound even immortal hunters. Witnesses cannot be harmed. But protectors who claim sanctuary right have immunity too. I claim sanctuary right. For myself and the children under my protection. The hunters froze. She can't, Helena said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. She's mortal. Sanctuary right is only for those bound by blood ritual to the royal line. Emma interrupted, holding up her scarred palm where Victor's blood had mixed with hers. Which I am, as of 2 hours ago. Lucian's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. That's creative interpretation. But not technically wrong. Victor breathed beside her, wonder and alarm mixing in his voice. Emma, if you claim sanctuary right, you're binding yourself permanently, too? I know. Emma met his eyes. I saw it in the visions. I know what it means. Victor prepared to argue, but Emma was already moving. The visions had shown her more than just history. They'd shown her how things worked. The geometry of power. The symbols that channeled it. She knelt quickly, setting the twins carefully in a supply crate, then grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the floor. Using rust and water, she began drawing on the concrete, the same protective sigils she'd seen in Victor's throne room, the wards that had defended Castle Drager for centuries. Stop her, Helena snapped, moving forward. But Victor stepped between them, and despite his weakness, there was something in his stance that made even Helena pause. You would attack a mortal performing sacred rites? Break 2 oaths instead of 1. The circles connected. The symbols flared, not with dramatic light, but with a subtle warping of air, a sense of wrongness that made Emma's stomach turn. She didn't fully understand what she was doing, was working purely on instinct and half-remembered visions, but somehow it was working. Impossible, Lucian whispered. Mortal magic shouldn't. Emma's hand slammed down on the final sigil. The basement exploded with light, real light this time, blinding and pure. The hunters recoiled, crying out. Emma grabbed the crate with the twins, Victor's arm, and ran. Not toward the factory door, that was blocked. Instead, she ran toward a crack in the far wall she'd noticed earlier, one that led deeper underground, into tunnels that honeycombed beneath the old city, passages that predated modern construction. They plunged into darkness, Victor stumbling beside her, the sounds of the hunters' pursuit echoing behind them. But the light from Emma's improvised ward held, buying them precious seconds. The tunnel branched. Emma chose left on instinct, then right, then left again, until the sounds of pursuit faded and they were alone in the suffocating dark. Finally, Emma stopped, gasping. They'd reached a junction where 4 tunnels met, marked with old stonework that looked older than the city above. Victorian-era construction, maybe earlier. A metal grate in the ceiling let in slivers of streetlight and fresh air. Victor collapsed against the wall, his breathing ragged but relieved. You did it. I don't know how, but you did it. Emma set the crate down, checking the twins. Both were remarkably calm, watching her with those knowing crimson eyes. The visions from the ritual. They showed me enough to improvise. Barely. More than improvise. Victor's gaze held hers in the dim light. You claimed sanctuary right. Drew protective wards without training. Emma Collins, you just performed royal magic, something that shouldn't be possible for a mortal. Emma's hands were still shaking. The ritual changed something, didn't it? When we shared blood, when I saw your world, it did something to me. It bound us, Victor said softly. Not permanently, but the connection remains. You carry a trace of the Draeger bloodline now. Enough to access certain abilities. He pushed himself upright with obvious effort. Enough to make you a target, alongside us, for the rest of your life. The weight of that settled over Emma like a shroud. She could go back. Right now, she could climb through that grate, return to her apartment, her job, her ordinary life. The hunters wanted Victor and the twins, not her. Not really. Victor seemed to read her thoughts.
Emma.
His voice was gentle, giving her an out even though she could see the desperate hope in his eyes. You've done more than anyone could have asked. More than I had any right to expect. If you want to go, I understand. I'll find a way forward. I'll come with you. The words surprised her as much as him. What? Emma looked down at Lysandra and Merrick, felt the phantom weight of them in her arms, remembered Merrick calming at her touch in a way he wouldn't for his own father. Remembered Lysandra's tiny hand reaching for her. She thought about the life she'd been living, safe, small, lonely in ways she'd never quite admitted. Then she looked at Victor, wounded, royal, impossibly real, and felt the pull of the bond between them, stronger than logic, deeper than fear. I'm coming with you, Emma said, her voice gaining certainty. Into your world. To wherever you're going. I'm not leaving the twins. And I'm not leaving you. Emma, you don't know what you're saying. My world is dangerous, political, full of beings who would. I just fought 3 legendary hunters with rust drawings and saw visions of a vampire civil war, Emma interrupted. I think I have a pretty good idea of what I'm getting into. She picked up the twins, one in each arm, and met Victor's eyes. You asked if I'd stay. If I'd help you protect them. My answer is yes. Wherever this leads. Victor stared at her, and she saw 1,000 emotions cross his face. Gratitude, disbelief, something that might have been the beginning of something deeper. My realm is in flames. I have no throne, no crown, no guarantee I can even reach it safely. I'm offering you nothing but danger and uncertainty. You're offering me purpose, Emma said quietly. Something that matters. Someone who needs me, 3 someones actually. That's more than I've had in years. For a long moment, Victor said nothing. Then he stepped forward, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. Then come. Help me reclaim what was stolen. Help me raise my children. Help me, his voice broke. Help me not face this alone. Emma leaned into his touch, feeling the supernatural cold of his skin, the tremor of exhaustion, the weight of everything he carried. You're not alone anymore. None of us are. Victor's thumb brushed her cheek, and Emma realized she was crying. The entrance to my realm lies beneath the city. A threshold hidden in the oldest tunnels. If we can reach it before the hunters find us again, then let's go. Emma adjusted her grip on the twins, who had begun to doze against her chest. Show me your world, your majesty. Victor's smile was small but genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Just Victor. If we're doing this together, it's just Victor. Victor, Emma repeated, testing the name without titles or terror attached. It felt right. Lead the way. They moved deeper into the tunnels, leaving the world Emma had known behind. Somewhere above, the vampire cafe stood empty, its gothic doors locked, its secrets safe. Somewhere behind them, 3 hunters regrouped and planned their next move. But ahead lay shadows that opened onto impossible places, a hidden realm waiting for its king to return, and a future neither Emma nor Victor could predict. As they walked into darkness, Victor's hand found hers. The twins slept peacefully, and Emma Collins, who had started this night as an ordinary waitress taking out trash, stepped forward into destiny. Whatever came next, war, magic, danger, or something resembling hope, they would face it together. The shadows swallowed them whole. And the real story was only just beginning.